MGX Minerals is revolutionizing the new energy economy with patented lithium extraction technology, replacing traditional solar evaporation using low-cost, low-energy nanofiltration. The first system of this paradigm shift technology is currently being commissioned. MGX Minerals trades on the CSE, symbol XMG, the OTCQB, symbol MGXMF, and Frankfurt, symbol 1MG. For more information, visit our website, mgxminerals.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Ross Kay. He's a homeowner consultant from thewealthyhomeowner.ca. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Jim.
Ross, the Real Estate Council of Canada, or association, says sales across the country were at a 5-year low. What's behind that?
What it is, it's the Canadian Real Estate Association trying to put a spin on the market, Jim, that allows their sales reps, their members, to keep making commission sales here in a cooling housing market. I can pretty much guarantee to you that the vast majority of even the realtors themselves have no idea what the Canadian Real Estate Association is commenting on or about why they're commenting the way that they're commenting. When we look at the stats, like last week was a big week in Canada, and for far bigger reasons than what your listeners are probably realizing. This desire by the Canadian Real Estate Association and the realtors to support the weakest members of their association at the expense of the Canadian public is just astounding. Now, what do you mean by that, Ross? Well, what I mean is this, Jim. The Canadian Real Estate Association, if you read their press release or you read their talking points, and all other real estate franchises like RE/MAX, Royal LePage, Sotheby's, they all do pull these same tricks. They continually reference seasonally adjusted numbers because those seasonally adjusted numbers, the way that they're calculated, the way that the methodology works, the way that the housing market works, always allows them to, the real estate agents or the realtors, to put a positive spin in the market. Now, you listeners, this is the type of spin that we're going to talk about right here, Jim. In May, the month of May, actual number of sales in the province of British Columbia dropped by 29%. Okay? So you had a 29% drop in sales year over year in the province of British Columbia. The Canadian Real Estate Association focuses on their seasonally adjusted number because what it said was sales were off by 4%. Now, you can imagine being a home buyer, someone ready to put their name on a dotted line, committing themselves and their family to 25 years worth of mortgage payments, and being told that sales are only down 4%. When in fact, actual sales were down 29%. And it's not just British Columbia, Jim, where this takes place. If we look at Ontario, in Ontario, sales were down province-wide by 21% in the month of May. 21%. The Canadian Real Estate Association said they were actually up 2% because they used their seasonally adjusted number. As I've told people on your show over and over and over again for the last couple of years, you cannot use seasonally adjusted numbers to monitor a housing market. You certainly can't use them to make the largest financial purchase of your lifetime. You can't use the new listings to sales ratio, the one where there is no evidence anywhere in the world that supports balanced buyers and sellers markets, as the Canadian Real Estate Association pretends there is. There is no such research ever completed. The Canadian housing market overall, Jim, has took a 16% drop in sales year over year. Now that is about 10,000 units just in 1 month alone. We're talking a decline in commissions earned by realtors by 16% just in that 1 month. Like I said, in British Columbia, realtors took a 29% hit on their income. In Ontario, realtors took a 21% hit. Because that's the other thing that your listeners don't understand about real estate statistics and how organized real estate in your local real estate board reports them. The focus on a percent always makes things sound better than what they really are, with the larger the market being measured. Because when you throw things in aggregate, 50% decreases on the market in one local municipality may only impact the national numbers by 0.1%. The huge province of Ontario, which is normally the modifier, the constant that has supported the real estate housing numbers across Canada for the last 5 years. When that market moves, the entire country moves. Because, you know, there was 20,000 sales in Ontario in May. Canada only had 50,000 sales. So there you go. 2/5 of the sales were all one province. Last year, it was even higher. So when you hear something about the real estate boards, a real estate association, a trade association, or a real estate franchising company, realtor bloggers, you hear all of these people talking. They simply don't understand how the housing market works and how real estate stats get produced. You had a 29% drop in sales in the province of British Columbia. British Columbia politicians are going to have a 29% reduction in revenues from that source. A 29% reduction in sales has is a causational fact on declining prices. British Columbia house prices once again rolled over. They're negative again. Province-wide we're talking about. We're not talking about Vancouver. We're not talking about single detached homes in Point Grey. We're talking about your entire province. You know, Ontario is cratering. So when you hear these numbers from the real estate associations, understand they're released for one reason and one reason alone: to allow home sellers to get the highest price possible in the shortest period of time for their home. That is the only purpose of those stats.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after the break.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO, on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario, with grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program to test numerous targets located by recent groundwork is planned for early 2018. Please visit our website at rmroyalty.com.
Vatic Ventures Corp. is a potash exploration company focused on the Korat Basin in Thailand, the world's largest undeveloped potash resource. Vatic's management has extensive potash exploration and development experience in Thailand. Vatic will have marketing advantage compared to Western producers. Drill program commences this spring. Vatic trades on the TSX Venture, symbol VCV, and on Frankfurt, symbol V8V2. Visit our website, vaticventures.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay. Ross, the Real Estate Council of BC has handed realtors a huge win at consumers' expense. Can you explain?
Well, what's happened in British Columbia is the practice of dual agency, where an agent, a brokerage can represent both the buyer and the seller of the same home, has been changed. The BC Real Estate Association, all of your local real estate boards, Real Estate Board of Greater Vancouver, Fraser Valley Real Estate Board, etc. All your real estate boards together. The Canadian Real Estate Association, over the last 2 years, has tried to foster this new definition of dual agency or double dipping of commission. And they've tried to move that discussion to an agent on an agent basis. In other words, the one sales agent, sales rep, cannot represent both the buyer and the seller of the same home. That's what they've tried to redefine what dual agency is. For 70 years, and in all successive changes to real estate trading legislation everywhere in North America over those 70 years, dual agency has always been at a brokerage level. As a matter of fact, when you sign to list your property, you actually sign it with the brokerage. The brokerage is the one who's responsible. The brokerage is the one who holds the trust deposit. The brokerage is the one who has to regulate their the agents that work at the sales reps that work at their brokerage. But what happened on June the 15th is a new interpretation of dual agency came into place in British Columbia, which is the same scam is trying to be run here in the province of Ontario. What they're trying to say now is that this dual agency, working for the buyer and the seller, both for the same property, is now only looked at as a sales rep. So, what this means is this, Jim. The Real Estate Council of British Columbia, Michael Noseworthy, your superintendent of real estate, have authorized husband and wife teams working in the same brokerage in the province of British Columbia to now represent the buyer and the seller of the same home without even having to disclose that they are representing both parties because they're husband and wife. They're two different people working in the same brokerage, working in the same office, often looking across at one another because the offices are jammed into the little tiny rooms that are so small there's no room to walk around. You're looking at one another in these offices. And now the registrar is saying, or the superintendent has decided, that husband and wife no longer have to inform the public that they are sharing in the deal in some way or another. And it gets even better than that, Jim. Everybody knows about these teams because all the real estate sales reps are all bragging about how they're the Joe Smith team, Joe Smith group, Joe Smith unit. They're all coming up with these terminologies so they don't cite the brokerage. The reason they use the Joe Smith team is because they don't want to talk about the broker that they're working at. They want to toot their own horn. Well, what these teams in fact are set up for, they're specifically set up that now in the province of British Columbia, the team leader, the agent, he can list the property or she can list the property, and then his sales team can go out and find the buyer, and his sales team can now sell the property that he or she has listed without having to inform the buyer that dual agency exists, because now it doesn't exist any longer. It is the most craziest thing. It's so crazy, Jim, that I'm even having a hard time explaining it in a way that the average consumer can understand. This is such an extreme change to the definition of agency in British Columbia that I know as of June the 16th, the day after this came into force. So this is a law, Jim. This is in force in British Columbia today. There is no way for a home buyer in the province of British Columbia to be sure that only their interests are being served. prior to June the 15th, because the old definition of dual agency was in place, at least if you were going to be lied to, they had to sign a piece of paper that said, I'm going to lie to you. But as of June the 16th, those pieces of paper no longer need to be signed. And it gets even better than that, Jim. There's this old brochure produced by the Canadian Real Estate Association that has been used coast to coast in Canada since 2000. It's called Working with a Realtor. It was created years and years ago to fool the public into still working with the same brokerage that had a property listed. At least that chintzy little tiny brochure that they had, it did spell out, for the person who wanted to read it, that dual agency was at brokerage level. That has now disappeared. The superintendent of real estate in British Columbia has told realtors that brochure is no longer usable. You now have to use our new paperwork. Our new paperwork does not say what dual agency is. It only talks about the new version of the new definition that they've come up with. That BC Korea, your local real estate boards, the Canadian Real Estate Association, has all conned regulators into believing. This is what happens when you have a regulator who doesn't understand the business. If you went to the local real estate council of British Columbia and you looked at the scale level of the sales reps who are on that board, generally speaking, they're the last people you would ever hire to sell your property. Their experience level is so low. They're so outdated. They have no idea what's going on. It's a universal reliance on the ignorance of the public to make commission. It is what has happened in British Columbia. What I'm going to tell your listeners is this. You cannot buy a property in British Columbia after June the 15th, 2018, using a realtor. Those days are over. If you do, you will be financially harmed. That is simply the truth. The superintendent for real estate in British Columbia has been conned by the real estate industry into doing things that are even worse for the consumer in British Columbia. He thinks that he's done something good, when in fact, I have just described to your listeners why it's just the opposite. It's worse. Prior to June the 15th, a husband and wife could not both get commission from the sale of a property that was listed with one or other when they're working at the same brokerage. Now, June the 16th, the husband and wife working at the same brokerage, looking across each other, desk to desk. One party can work for the buyer, the other party can work for the seller. And they don't even have to tell you that that's what's really going on.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Ross Kay. Ross, we keep hearing a lot of whining from millennials about, I can't afford a home. I can't afford a home. What do they need to do besides whining?
Well, I think the whining portion, Jim, I think that is that, you know, you have to understand that These people generally, they've gone off to university for a couple of years, they've gotten their degree, they've come out, they've started to working, and they are also inundated with social media today. So social media has totally revolutionized how we communicate with one another. So the millennials, that is really the first buyer group to come into the marketplace where communication, the communication of a thought, of an idea, of an opinion, really can happen instantaneously, and it can overwhelm the listeners to that opinion. And millennials are really a case in point. The millennial is inundated with being told how housing is less affordable for them than it was for their parents, how hard done by that they are going to be, how their parents hit the jackpot by being able to buy a house back when it was $70,000, how the millennials are never going to get into the housing market, how millennials going to have to save for 25 years to get a down payment. Well, what millennials don't understand is, Jim, is that their parents felt the exact same way when their parents were buying their first home. What they don't understand is that their parents had to figure out a way to save their 10% down payment. The same way that millennials have to figure out a way to save the 10% down payment. Now, what is different is that there are lots of options available to millennials that were never available to their parents in terms of arranging that down payment. But you need to have a plan in place, not only for how you're going to buy a house, but how you're going to pay off your mortgage over the next 25 years. And instead of the press, I know you got Generation Squeeze, the con artists out at Generation Squeeze out in British Columbia, who are now going to be finding out, because of the way the housing market is rolling over right now, that their personal agenda, which it looks like now they've gone to the developer builder community, is nothing more than a sham. Anyways, the people who have listened to them, who have lost or cost themselves a couple of years in their home ownership goals, you need to have a plan about how you're going to go about doing it. So if a millennial sits back, first of all, housing prices are not going to keep going up forever like everybody tells you they are. And you're going to find that over the next 6 months, even in British Columbia, that is not the case. Housing prices peak, they plateau, they may fall, or they may have a period of stagnation. That's going to happen. So in other words, if prices are staying level, then if you don't buy today and instead you save your money for the down payment instead of paying a mortgage, then you're getting further ahead. And that is how you will get your down payment saved. Now, you need to have a plan. You need to know whether it's in an RSP, a TFSA, a home buyer plan. You need to know what to do with that money to be able to maximize its growth while you're building your down payment. And you also have to set yourself up from when that down payment is available to be in a position to be able to make an informed decision what the type of home to buy, how much home to buy, where to buy, and how many steps up the property ladder you are planning to take over the next 25 to 30 years. But that's why you need a plan. I read your listeners, this is the easy way to describe it, Jim. CMHC has approved first-time homebuyers to spend up to a maximum of 39% of their pre-tax income to purchase their first home for the last 30 years. So first-time homebuyers 30 years ago were allowed to spend a maximum 39% of their pre-tax income on mortgage, property taxes, and a little bit of heat and hydro. That's the maximum they were allowed to spend each month. Millennials today are only allowed to spend the exact same amount, We can go into get all the nonsense about this B20 mortgage stress test rule, which is nothing like the public is being told what it really is. But the fact of the matter is, you still are allowed to spend 39% of your pre-tax income to buy your house. The exact same thing as people did 30 years ago. So these wage to income, GDP, or income to debt service ratios that we hear in the paper, they're just nonsense. Because years ago, you paid a whole bunch of interest and a little bit of principal. Now you pay a whole bunch of principal and a little bit of interest. Who in their right mind wouldn't be wanting to pay down a whole bunch of principal and a little bit of interest versus a whole bunch of interest and a little bit of principal each month? Millennials need to sit down and see the numbers in front of them on a sheet of paper or on their computer monitor. They need to look at how it's going to work out over the next 25 to 30 years. They need to decide whether or not that's in their best interest. What they don't need to hear is a bunch of people who have no idea what they're talking about when it comes to home ownership, seeking to get their own personal gain by making millennials feel shitty. Feel bad, excuse my language. I don't know if you bleep that out or not, Jim. They just don't need to hear that. What they need to hear is, okay, it's the same for you as it was for your parents. You need to have a plan to get into the market. Everybody's plan is going to be different. There is no such thing as a single plan for everyone because everybody's circumstances are far different. If you live in Calgary, if you live in Saskatchewan, if you live in Ontario, if you live in Newfoundland, everybody has to have a totally different strategy to build their down payment for their home ownership decision. If you're moving to Windsor, Ontario, or you're moving to Toronto, Ontario, it is two totally different strategies, totally different millennial plans that need to be created. What I'll tell your listeners is this. All the whining and moaning, these crazy things you hear about, it's going to take you 25 years to save up your down payment, housing prices are going to keep going up forever, it's all nonsense. And the reason I know it's nonsense is because we have people right now, Jim, on these plans who are happy. They're ecstatic. They know what they're hearing in the paper is nonsense. They know everything that comes out of Generation Squeeze is nonsense. They know it because they're sitting there looking at their numbers themselves on a computer monitor. And that's what millennials need to be told.
Ross, something really simple. I keep hearing stories now. Millennials don't know how to cook, so they order in food or go out to eat every night. What a difference it would make if they bought their food at the supermarket and went out to eat once a week or once a month.
Well, or if you want, life is choices. Isn't that really what it is, Jim?
Absolutely.
30 years ago, no one would think about taking a holiday down south in a 5-year window when they were going to buy a home. People 30 years ago, when they were going to get married, would not have a wedding that cost $40,000, $50,000.
$100,000.
And still expect to go and be able to buy a house. They wouldn't do that. They would say, no, we're not going to spend that money in the wedding because we want to buy a house. Even now, and I know the female listeners are not going to like this. Even a wedding ring today. I have talked to people where they're like $20,000 and $30,000 on an engagement ring. Well, that's the down payment on your house. 30 years ago, that wouldn't happen. Those were not the choices that were made. I'm not saying the choice is any better today or any worse today than it is, but it is still a choice. It's the exact same choice that had to be made 30 years ago that has to be made today. And people need to just tell millennials that. We're actually right now, Jim, considering for our buyer program for millennials, making it mandatory for first-time buyers to have credit counseling as part of the program. We're actually thinking to making it mandatory. So, in other words, if you want to access this program, we are going to pay, because it's the way that the program is set up. We will pay, the wealthy homeowner will pay for you to go see a credit counselor before you even start your plan. In other words, you're hearing all of these people getting into trouble right now, and they're going to talk to credit counselors because they purchased a home over the last 5 years, and now they're getting into trouble. Why not start your process that way? Why not go see an expert? Someone who has handled credit for decades, whose entire business is built on it. They cannot make any money from the advice they give you. They're just going to give you honest advice. So right now, Jim, we're thinking about for our millennial program. This is the honest truth as I'm talking to you here. We are thinking about making credit counseling, and even though it's just one trip. I mean, it's not like they're going to take some big course or something, but make that a mandatory condition of participation in the program. So in other words, if you want to stay no risk, you want to stay no cost, you want to get all your program fees refunded, one of the conditions is you have to go talk to a credit counselor, because I think that's what's needed right now, Jim. And I think these millennial conversations, it's proof that it's needed.
Ross, great advice, and thank you so much for chatting with us.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Jim.
My guest has been home ownership consultant Ross Kay from thewealthyhomeowner.ca. You're listening to HowStreet.com Radio. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet. Questions for the show or our guests, like Ross, can be sent to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com Radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com Radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.